What's going on, everybody? Jeff Holiday here, and today I wanted to do a response video, and it's not something that I necessarily feel the need to do very often. However, the size of this person's channel, the reach that they do have, and the incredible amount of misinformation that was put out in this video kind of requires me to do it. This is the very definition of what my job is about. This is the video 5 Reasons Not to Get Vaccinated by Jordan Sather on his channel Destroying the Illusion with almost 200,000 subscribers. This has been viewed 22,000 times so far with only 50 downvotes. So it's safe to assume that this kind of information is not being very critically examined. Also, and this is probably the most important thing that I can share with you, is if we go to the description, there is absolutely no citations, no evidence, no nothing for everything that he claims in this video. That's going to be important as we go forward. Now, there's an unbelievable amount of, well, frankly, misinformation and lies in this video, and I don't know how long my response will have to be, but I'm going to try and make my counter-arguments as concise as possible so that if you find yourself out there in the world having to stare down this kind of an argument from an anti-vaxxer, you'll know at least how I responded. So, let's get started. What are the 5 reasons not to get vaccinated?
Reason number 1, because they destroy your immune system. You heard me right, destroy your immune system. I often call this backwards world because everything that we're taught from authorities or, all those official stories that we get, it's basically backwards from how things really are.
I do really want to point out, he does have a QAnon Q in the back next to his Himalayan pink salt lamp. I'm actually recording several videos today that will be released sequentially throughout the month of November. And quite a few of them have Himalayan pink salt lamps. I'm not really sure what that is. But it's a very easy claim to be able to say something like, well, if vaccines destroy your immune system, well, how? Because everything that we're told is a lie. Oh, well, I'm just thoroughly convinced. Wow, Jordan.
And we're told that vaccines are strengthening our immune system. They help us fight off all these diseases. But is that really the case?
Yes. Yes, it is.
I mean, when you think about it, we've had these incredible exponential rises in all sorts of immune problems, especially autoimmune disorders, cancers, other dysfunctions like this, correlating with the exponential increase in all the shots that we get in the first 10, 15 years of our life these days. And really, when you think about how the immune system is supposed to function, we have...
Before we get into how you think the immune system is supposed to function, let's break some of this down. A vaccine is not designed to help your immune system. A vaccine is designed to train your immune system, to give it a head start on being able to battle vaccine-preventable diseases. That's the whole point of it, so that you've already built up your antibodies and it can take care of it. But this idea that it's helping or that it's somehow destroying in some way is very, very strange. Now, let's say, for the sake of argument, that there are a massive increase in autoimmune disorders and cancers and other dysfunctions, which is a fantastic medical term, and thank you so much for using it, Jordan. But let's say that there is this uptake. Now, in the void of any other type of answer, the anti-vaxxer will always have an answer for you. And it's in the name, anti-vaxxer. And you'll notice this if you start paying attention enough, is if you come up with some problem in society and you don't really quite understand what the genesis is of it, where it comes from, and you ask an anti-vaxxer, they'll find some way to say the problem is vaccines. Every time. But also, on the topic of correlations, this is one of my favorite websites, Spurious Correlations, and it's very much to prove a point. Suicides by hanging, strangulation, and suffocation correlates with U.S. spending on science, space, and technology. So obviously, science, space, and technology is leading to people hanging themselves. Number of people who drowned by falling into a pool correlates with films Nicolas Cage appeared in. I personally knew that Nicolas Cage was responsible for drowning deaths. I don't know where the rest of you have been. Number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets per capita cheese consumption. So now you heard it here, folks. Do not eat cheese. You will get strangled to death in your bed sheets. But here's the thing. One of the biggest correlations that anti-vaxxers like to put out there. And keep in mind, I could make the usual argument that I do, which is, well, there are more people suffering from autoimmune disorders and cancers because we have better treatments for them, so they're living longer, so there are more of them because they're not dying so quickly. I could make that argument, and I could go in depth into it, but honestly, it's kind of an old one. But they love to throw out this correlation that there's been a rise in autism as there's been a rise in vaccines. Despite the fact that we've very broadly increased the spectrum of how people get diagnosed with autism, no. It's not that. See, I found an actually stronger correlation here. Autism and organic food sales. That's a little troubling, don't you think? But it comes down to the basic and simple idea. Correlation is not causation. Just because something seems to be very similar with another thing does not necessarily mean that one thing causes the other thing. That's not something that you can just broadly do. But then, for somebody who made such a god-awful video as this and has no citations, I don't know why I'm that surprised. Now, I'm sorry that I interrupted, Jordan. You were going to explain to us how the immune system is supposed to function.
Have a natural inflammatory response that our body gives off anytime we get pathogens, bad bacteria, viruses inside of our body, whether it gets inside our body from a cut or through the nose, the mouth, the mucosal membranes as they naturally should.
That's a big word for you. I'm very proud of you, Jordan. Mucosal is a very big word, but go ahead, please.
We have this inflammatory response that is supposed to be balanced properly. But when we inject these viruses, these DNA strands, and these adjuvants into our blood, right? It doesn't go through those natural processes as they should. It gets right into our blood, and it stimulates the immune system. And again, when we get how many shots in the first 10 to 15 years of our life these days, it stimulates your immune system over and over and over again. So what does this do in the long run? We're talking hypersensitivity. We're talking an immune system that can't stay balanced when it's trying to fight off an infection. Anytime you get an infection, it's going to overstimulate and overreact every single time. This is autoimmunity, guys.
No, that is not autoimmunity. That is not in any way a clear and accurate description of an autoimmune disorder at all. You cannot hypersensitize your immune system. You cannot power up nor power down your immune system. That's not how it functions on a biomechanical level. He seems to have this idea that there's a difference distinctly between the inflammatory response through nose and mouth and through injections. The idea that he's right is requiring so much charity that you would have to assume that Jordan here has graduated medical school and is intentionally trying to dumb it down to make it easier to digest. Now, I think we can all pretty much agree that this is not the case, and in fact, he's just completely getting this wrong. This is amazing. Now, trying to decipher in the mishmash of everything that Jordan was saying, you could even take the impression he was saying that developing an immunity at all is not a good thing. But if for some reason developing an immunity is now overreacting the immune system, well, what is the difference between contracting measles yourself and getting an immunity or getting a vaccine against measles? What would be the difference? I mean, in one case, a natural infection, you're getting hit way harder, way harder by a factor of, I don't know, thousands? I mean, it's baffling to me that something that exists in such a much more minor potency, Jordan believes can cause all these massive dysfunctions and allergies and autoimmune disorders, which, by the way, Jordan, fibromyalgia, as far as we understand so far, is not an autoimmune disorder. But the immune system in the human body is incredibly complicated. I have a link down below. It kind of explains how you can't boost the human immune system and like people who claim that you can. There's some pretty troubling stuff in there. But also, in what ways the immune system can be affected this way or the other. And basically, long story short, Jordan just gets it wrong.
And when talking allergies, you think of injecting these foreign DNA strands right into our blood. Well, what gets injected into our blood from vaccines? We're talking peanut oil.
No, hang on. Time out. Peanut oil is not in vaccines. This is a commonly used lie perpetrated by people who are in the anti-vax camp. This is all based on a misunderstanding of a couple of news articles from the 1960s. And what they were announcing was they were testing a new type of adjuvant called Adjuvant 65, which was based on peanut oil and was in testing for vaccines. Back then, people were very excited about vaccines. Yes, can we please stop being quite so diseased? Now, this is really easy to discover if the anti-vaxxers out there would do what they always tell everybody else to do, and you read the insert. Adjuvant 65 is not in vaccines. And in fact, it was never approved to be used in vaccines in the United States. As in never. It never happened. It's not there.
We're talking egg proteins.
Egg proteins are actually in vaccines, yes. If you have an egg allergy, you should consult your doctor before getting a flu shot or the vaccine for yellow fever. But the rest are totally safe for you if you have an egg allergy, yeah.
And a lot of other foreign DNA strands. So, with so many kids these days getting...
Wait a minute. What do you mean foreign DNA strands? What do you mean foreign DNA strands? I mean, are you only safe with vaccines being made with minerals? I mean, you know that viruses, like, do you not actually understand what biology is, Jordan? Like, what the hell? Eggs would be a foreign DNA strand. I mean, I have this... So we keep running into this problem with people who try and promote themselves as experts in vaccines or GMOs or anything else. They get this idea that DNA is contagious. Like, you could brush up against something and like, oh, I got infected with DNA. Somebody injected me with something that was a little bit of DNA in it, and now I've got DNA-ness. I don't understand where any of this comes from. It's really, really strange. God. Okay. He's about to go to reason 2, so we'll just let this run.
Peanut allergies, egg allergies, and just random allergies. Are vaccines playing a major part in that? Yeah, I think so.
And you're wrong, and you literally have no evidence that they are. None. You provide no evidence for that. You're just like, yeah, I think they are. By the way, did I mention yet that this kid has been on InfoWars? Like, is anybody really shocked? And that for some reason he has a framed picture of koalas behind him? Low-rent Devon Sawa here is a very strange individual. Anyway, let's go.
Moving on, reason number 2. Not just do vaccines destroy our immune system, but they also destroy our nervous system.
Whoa.
Again, talking injection of all these foreign agents right into our blood. And shoot, what are a lot of these foreign agents that have been found in these vaccines? Mercury, aluminum, heavy metals like this, and not just heavy metals, but even nanoparticles. Nanoparticles aren't listed on the ingredients. Don't know whether or not vaccine manufacturers know these nanoparticles are in vaccines, but there has been studies that have shown nanoparticles in vaccines.
Whoa, nanoparticles. That's scary sounding. It's got the word nano in it. All right, let's break this bullshit down. For everything that I'm about to say, there are going to be citations in the description. I've read a little bit of a pseudo script out for this, so if I'm kind of looking like I'm reading, that's why. But I'm just going to try and make this as accurate as I possibly can. All of my evidence is right down there. Let's go. Number 1, thimerosal contains ethyl mercury. This type of harmful mercury is methyl mercury. That's very different. That can be found in fish and in thermometers. That's the methyl. Thimerosal, which was in vaccines, was ethyl mercury. Well, I keep wanting to say mercury, and it makes me think of, like, Steve Urkel. Anyway, ethyl mercury, which we do use, is safe, and it's easily broken down by the body and just passed out. Also, it's not used in childhood vaccines at all. Only certain flu shots even use thimerosal today. And if you're really that worried about thimerosal, you can specifically go and get a flu shot that does not have it. You, the consumer, have options. If you choose, you have that option. Number 2, aluminum is not especially toxic, especially given how tiny amounts are used as adjuvants in vaccines. We're talking tiny, tiny, microscopic, minuscule little bits. You're most likely to consume far more aluminum through normal eating patterns, but the link between it and autism has been thoroughly debunked. The link is in the description down below, because that's the main thing that they start to talk about when they talk about aluminum in vaccines. Number 3, there are no heavy metals in vaccines. It's used as an excuse to push dangerous chelation therapies. That is actually what it is from. People who want you to go through chelation are like, well, it's all the heavy metals in your blood. And they try and convince you that everything contains heavy metals, and that's why you need to pay for this therapy that is unproven and, in many places, illegal. And number 4, nanoparticles are only mentioned because anti-vaxxers hear the whole nano part and instantly think of, like, spooky sci-fi movies, you know? It's actually a really fascinating technology. And I have a paper that's linked down below in the description. And if you're really interested in what nanoparticles are and how they work, like, go check it out. It's like, they're good things. Yeah. Anyway, take it away. We're about to get into one that's just really, really frustrating.
So we have all of these neurotoxic agents getting injected right into our blood. And again, as I just discussed, it's not going through the natural processes. You know, when you eat foods that might have some aluminum caking agents or something like that within them, at least going through the digestive tract, your body might have a chance to be able to filter some of that out. But again, injecting right into the blood, body can't do that. All that mercury, all that aluminum will get into the blood, will cross the blood-brain barrier, and start screwing up your brain, your nervous system. It'll get into the cerebrospinal fluid, and once it gets past that blood-brain barrier, it's very, very tough to get out.
This is going to be a lot of fun. So apparently Jordan doesn't really seem to think that, you know, the whole process of liver, our kidneys, that nothing really detoxifies our blood, probably because he's bought into some idea that you have to do some stupid shake or fast to detoxify your body, because our stupid old bodies just can't seem to do it themselves. But let's ignore that for a second. Let's say for a second that there's all this toxic material inside of your blood, and then it hits that blood-brain barrier. Well, the problem is in the name. There's blood, okay, your blood, your brain, okay, and then barrier. There's that word. What does the word barrier mean? What does the word barrier mean? Does it mean that possibly it's something that divides the access between the blood and the brain? Now, don't get me wrong, the blood-brain barrier is semi-permeable. Absolutely. Absolutely. It has to be. You have to be able to get things like glucose, ketone bodies, and amino acids to your brain, and your brain has to be able to get rid of cellular waste. That's understandable. But the very point of the blood-brain barrier, the exact specific reason we have one, is to keep things that are neurotoxic out of our brains. The only way this argument from Jordan makes sense is if he thinks that our brains and the barriers surrounding it are so poorly designed that somehow it just lets all this bad shit that it is specifically adapted through evolution to stop. It just doesn't do that. And the only reason why he would think that is because it's convenient for his argument, not because it has any factual basis whatsoever. My God. Now, before I get any of these idiot anti-vaxxers who are going to show up to this video and leave the stupid comment down below that children's blood-brain barriers aren't fully formed by the time they're vaccinated. Yes, they are. They are before they are even born. Just please, if you were about to leave that damn comment, cease. Don't waste your damn time. All right?
Okay, reason number 3 why not to get vaccinated is because there is no liability for the manufacturers of these products. I kid you not. There was literally a vaccine court set up in this country a few decades ago that made it basically impossible for people injured by vaccines to sue the manufacturers. They can't go through the normal federal court system. What they have to do is go through this special vaccine court, get special judges and special people appointed to these courts, and then try to sue the manufacturer through it.
That is not accurate at all. At all. In fact, the NVICP was actually created to make it easier for people to put in claims. No, absolutely not. Okay, here we go. The NVICP was created in the 80s specifically after the anti-vaccination movement realized that they could start suing for all sorts of things, from like your acne to a heart attack that you had 40 years after a vaccination. You blame all this on vaccines and start suing, and suddenly the courts are being tied up in litigation processes, and the inadvertent, or maybe it was explicitly intended, consequence of this was that America was at risk of having a vaccine shortage. The anti-vaxxers were literally going to sue vaccines into oblivion simply by tying it up in court, and the inadvertent cause of that, or the explicitly, perhaps, you never know with these people because they are crazy, direct thing that would come from this is more sick and probably more dead children. Whew. Now, the thing that's really frustrating about this is the NVICP works very, very well. It works very, very well because it specifically requires that you prove without a shadow of a doubt, by dealing with a real medical professional and not some random anti-vaxxer on the internet, prove that there was actual legitimate harm that was caused to a child by vaccines. And this does happen. It's extremely rare. You are more likely to be struck by lightning than to be actually harmed by a vaccine in any substantial way. And when that does unfortunately happen, which hopefully will be eventually reduced down to 0 and quickly, the NVICP facilitates that having monetary compensation. It streamlines the whole process. And it's there to protect all of our kids from having what they need to not get sick stripped away by the litigious actions of a bunch of anti-vax assholes. That's the point. You see, in the anti-vaxxer mind, vaccines are causing a medical holocaust, and this is all being covered up because there's a grand conspiracy of doctors and researchers, scientists and businessmen who are all out there intentionally trying to suppress the truth, when in reality the truth is that vaccines are overwhelmingly safe. That's it.
Okay, moving right through this. Reason number 4 is because of all of the fake science, fake history, fake information we're taught about vaccines. If you think the news is fake, try science, try history, right? I was discussing earlier, do vaccines really reduce disease and strengthen our immune system?
Just wait for this.
You know, the history we're taught about vaccines in school and from the media, we're taught that vaccines were the reason in the 1950s and 60s and 70s that all these contagious diseases were eradicated.
It'll be worth it. Hang on.
Is that really the case? I mean, when you connect the dots and think about it, actually, these diseases, many of them, like whooping cough, like others in the 50s and 60s, they were reducing a lot. Before the vaccines were even introduced to the public, these disease rates were declining. So then what was the actual cause? Looks like they just wrote the history books the way they wanted to falsely attribute vaccines to reducing disease. But again, what was really the cause of these diseases declining? Was it better nutrition? Wow, we had refrigeration systems that could keep food fresher longer. We had highway systems.
All right. He's going to go off for a minute, but I can shred this one pretty easily too. And I'm happy to do so because I tend to see this argument pop up a lot. And I'm sure some of you out there have seen it too. Now, generally speaking, when somebody hoists up a graph that diseases were already in decline, those graphs usually have very specific language on them, or they have no language whatsoever. It's just a very pretty line of causation with not a lot of descriptors. Now, what you'll find if you ask or if you really pay attention to the text that's written on that, those graphs show deaths, not incidents of infection, that deaths were going down. That, for instance, deaths by whooping cough, pertussis, or deaths by measles were going down. And that seemed to decrease quite a bit even before we were vaccinated against them. And that's true, but that's not incidence of infection. If you go and you look up those statistics, it starts to paint a very different picture. Instead, it starts to show that incidences of infection started going down with the introduction of a vaccine. Of course, they're not going to show you that. They're going to show you the graph that looks, well, something that makes sense to their argument, of course. But even more so, we know for a fact that this is the case, not only just because of the historical record of these types of vaccines, but for instance, we have the HIB vaccine that was released in 1990, and from that we have a beautiful graph that we can see that even well after we had already had things like refrigeration and roads for some reason. I don't know why he was talking about roads. And sanitation, we'd already had those for quite a while. But it seemed to be that the vaccine was the thing that made the infection rate go down. Weird.
The powers in control write the history books the way they want and start brainwashing the public to make them think it was vaccines that reduced disease. And not just that, but again, all the fake studies, fake statistics, fake science that we're told about vaccines, you got to understand the control that's had by the powers that be, powers in control, whatever you want to call them, the control they have over the education institutions, over the studies that are done. You got to understand how easy it is for these scientists to fabricate studies.
It's fairly safe to say that there are literally hundreds, if not literally thousands of studies showing vaccine safety. The idea that every single one of them is fake and that every doctor and patient, administrator, the janitors of the buildings that these studies were conducted, that they're all paid actors, that this stretches across decades and almost every continent. The notion of it is absolutely ridiculous. The concept that something like this could be a manufactured, full-blown, biggest conspiracy in the history of the world is incredibly stupid. But then again, I should probably point, there's a big old Q right behind Jordan here. So I'm not really that surprised either.
And you also have to understand, if they don't do a particular study to get a particular result for whoever's funding them, they lose their grants, they lose their funding, right? There is so much special interest in the healthcare industry that we have, in this pharmaceutical industry, right? And last thing to say on this particular point is that when you study the history of healthcare in this country and education in this country, you go back to the early 1900s and you actually find the same families, the same names, the same industrialist, deep state, oil baron powers, right? namely the Rockefellers. A lot of people call this the Rockefeller medical system that we have because really...
It's the shadow government. It's the shadow government, ladies and gentlemen. You see, this is the deep state Illuminati's Satanist agenda. Jesus Christ, Jordan. What the hell is wrong with you?
Now, lastly, my fifth reason why not to get vaccinated is because of the thousands and thousands of basically horror stories, testimonials that we have from parents around the country of vaccines harming their children, not just harming, but even killing their children.
It's kind of odd that he didn't say millions, because it really, if we're going for something as massive of a conspiracy as this, I don't think it's going too far to say millions. I mean, for the love of God, man, your argument is that a global conspiracy stretching back to possibly centuries worth of suppressing the truth. Well, I'm surprised you're not calling it a medical holocaust, Jordan. Thank you for your restraint. Meanwhile, we could actually take a look and see what the real harm is. Let's do that. Over the past 2 decades, childhood vaccines have saved the lives of 732,000 U.S. children and prevented more than 300 million kids from getting sick, according to a 2014 study from the CDC. Nearly 90% of vaccine side effects are not serious, according to the CDC. More than 20 rigorous scientific studies have shown that there is no link between the MMR vaccine and autism. A 2011 report from the National Academy of Medicine reviewed more than 1,000 vaccine studies and concluded that serious reactions to vaccines are extremely rare. The MMR vaccine can cause fevers, and some children who develop a fever can have a seizure. These are called fever-triggered seizures. However, studies showed there is 1 case of fever-triggered seizure for every 3,000 to 4,000. And these seizures almost never cause harm over the long term. About 1 in 10 children who is infected with measles develops an ear infection, and such infections can result in permanent hearing loss. For every 1,000 children who get measles, 1 or 2 will die from the disease. 2 doses of the measles vaccine are about 97% effective at preventing measles. Now, not on this list, and I should probably mention as well, as is very important, reactions and strong reactions to the measles vaccine are about 1 in a million, as compared to 1 in 1,000 who naturally get measles will die. Now, there's no reason to hide any of these statistics. There's no reason to try and be like, well, it's not so bad. No, just be brutally forthright and honest. There are some risks to this, and we should acknowledge them. And hopefully, as the availability of DNA sequencing continues to be more and more effective, we can identify more markers so that before children get vaccinated, we can tell whether or not it's going to cause an adverse reaction, and then we'll have other options for them. This is good. This can only be a net positive. Now, the rest of this video is honestly just a bunch of blather. It really honestly is. I will say I appreciate that Jordan did not try and weaponize anybody's specific horror story of vaccinations, but yeah, no, it's grossly irresponsible to put out a video like this, and yeah, this guy's an asshole for it. Anyway, that's going to be it for me today, guys. I just needed to do this video because, you know, it got some traction. It's a decently sized channel, and it is incorrect. It's horrifically wrong. All of my sources, everything that I've been talking about, it's all in the description down below if you'd like to cross-check it. By all means, if there's something that I might have misinterpreted or got wrong, you can always have that conversation with me in the comments down below or on Twitter. Or maybe you can catch me live over at twitch.tv/RealJeffHoliday. But otherwise, from my family to yours, I hope you are well, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.